So for me, at the beginning, when I joined the private sector, coming out from WWF, I wanted to be like a panda undercover in this giant multinational to understand how I could influence them. How was a business case? How could I make this happen, you know?
So welcome to the stream, an unscripted, unedited, free-flowing conversation featuring guests who reject the status quo with a bias for action in the world of water and beyond. My name is Tom Freyberg. I'm an environmental journalist and content creator specializing in water.
And I'm Will Sarni, a water strategy consultant doing my part to solve wicked water problems.
And today we are thrilled to be joined by Carolina Garcia, who is the Global Sustainability and Innovation Director at AB InBev. Carolina, thanks for joining us and welcome to the stream. How are you?
Thank you, Tom. Thanks, Will, for inviting me to the stream. I'm very excited to have this conversation with both of you.
Thank you. So, Carolina, we love how you're at the intersection between, I guess, multinationals, between a multinational and startups and innovation. So we really can't wait to talk to you about that. But firstly, for anyone listening, if you ever are visiting Madrid and you're looking for recommendations, please speak to Carolina because she's got the most amazing restaurant and bar recommendations. Just wanted to kind of get that in as a thank you to start with. So, yeah, Carolina, you're based in New York, originally from Colombia, and quite an interesting journey, you could say, through to your current role with AB InBev. So maybe you could start by kind of talking us through that. And you're kind of from a legal background and then went on to work for WWF, right?
Excellent, Tom. I never expected that in introduction. Now I'm going to be called by travel agencies to endorse people visiting Madrid. That's great. So thank you for the introduction. As you mentioned, I am Colombian. I was born and raised in Bogota, and Colombia is one of the most biodiverse countries in the world. So I grew up loving nature, wanting to protect nature. I studied law, went to law school, but ever since I went to law school, I focused on sustainability and how to protect our planet. Soon after I graduated from law school, I joined the World Wildlife Fund, which is one of the global organizations fighting to protect the planet. And in a very interesting moment, because we were in the middle of the Paris Agreement negotiations, the road to Paris was tricky and very challenging. There were many skeptics that never thought that a new global climate agreement could be accomplished. And I was part of that process. And I think soon after we were working together in the negotiations, it became pretty clear that it was impossible to solve wicked problems, like Will was saying, without the private sector, right? The private sector is more than 60% of the global GDP and more than 60% of global employment. So of course, they are part of the problem, and that's why they also have the power of being part of the solution. And I think we need to build a different type of private sector, right? One that has embedded within its DNA sustainability. So it became pretty clear that the private sector could be the solution and could be the key to solving many of these environmental issues. So the Paris Agreement was adopted. That was great, such a landmark, such an accomplishment for many that were struggling to get this done. And then, you know, it was the moment for action to actually deliver. And not only on the Paris Agreement, I think 2015 was such a year of promise. We had the UN Global SDGs as a new framework of action, the Paris Agreement, and many other international initiatives giving us the guideline to move forward. So after that, it became clear for me that I wanted to understand a sector that was completely strange for me, the private sector. And quickly after the Paris Agreement, well, a couple of years after that, I joined Anheuser-Busch InBev in the Colombia office and began this journey that has been amazing on the private sector.
Carolina, you touch on something that's really interesting, and as an outsider, really knits into how the 100+ Accelerator program started, which is, you know, redefining, reinventing, if you will, the role of the private sector in solving wicked problems. And as I understand it, your CEO at the time, Carlos Brito, declared that he wanted to be a 100-year company. And he knew that sustainability had to be embedded into the business strategy of the organization. And I find that to be such a motivating, compelling story, because more often than not, sustainability is an add-on. It's a, yeah, we're gonna do it, as opposed to, oh no, it is our strategy going forward. And I just find it absolutely amazing, a game changer in terms of how that CEO launched the 100 plus, and now you're driving that. So correct me if I'm wrong, but that piece of the story I find really interesting.
Well, I think that companies that are not embedding sustainability within the DNA, they stayed behind in the last century paradigm, right? In this century, sustainability can no longer be an add-on, because it is what will enable us to grow, to be resilient. It's what's actually going to be the most important thing in this century. So yeah, of course, all the corporations and organizations are in this journey of shifting the paradigm. But definitely for us, we're a company that produces beer, and beer is made of natural ingredients. More than 90% is water, then you have barley, hops. We are dependent on a thriving environment, on thriving communities. So if we don't take sustainability seriously, not as an add-on, but as the DNA of our business, we won't have a business in this century. So it's not philanthropic, it's not corporate social responsibility. It's something that we need to do if we want to be successful in this century. And I think that many other corporations are realizing this, and that's why we're seeing a big momentum. But of course, we are still far, we still need to do way more. The challenge is daunting, so there's much more to be done.
I mean, Will, you always talk about how the private sector, multinationals have scale to really move the needle when it comes to some of these wicked problems. And I think what's interesting about your backstory, Carolina, is perhaps looking from the outside in and thinking, okay, yeah, there is a potential to change here with the private sector and scale. And you could have easily gone down a career path of continuing with NGOs or even to campaign groups to kind of perhaps campaign against what multinationals are doing, but you thought actually I could drive more change from being inside, and then arguably that's led you to the 100 plus Accelerator.
Yeah, definitely. And something that we hear all the time is the multi-stakeholder approach, right? Like we need actors to solve all these wicked problems. However, a big challenge is that sometimes we don't understand each other because NGOs speak a different language than the private sector or the governments. So I think it's actually very valuable when people move around, so you can bring all this vision, all this great added value that you have from working at an NGO to the private sector, and the other way around as well. So for me, at the beginning, when I joined the private sector, coming out from WWF, I wanted to be like a panda undercover in this giant multinational to understand how I could influence them. How was a business case? How could I make this happen, And soon I realized that the private sector has an enormous capacity to impact, to deliver and transform, that we have such a scale. If you take, for instance, Anheuser-Busch InBev, we operate in over 50 countries, sell our brands in over 150 countries. So our value chain has the power of actually delivering and transform. So if we do anything like from shifting to 100% renewable electricity or achieving our ambition to be carbon neutral by 2040. So imagine what that impact looks like. So I think that the private sector can do so many things. And I actually fell in love with it because I saw how anything that you did actually was materialized. It was tangible. You saw that change. So I think that that's why I've stayed there for the last 5 years, working at a local, at a regional, and now at a global level. That said, even though a company like Anheuser-Busch InBev is very big and powerful and has all this capacity, no one company can solve the world's challenges on its own. And AB InBev can be the most sustainable company in the world. And if we are alone, that's worthless. We need all the companies to be the most sustainable companies in the world because we need to change. All of us, we need to change. And that's why platforms, and we'll talk later about this in a minute, like the 100 Plus Accelerator are so powerful because we're bringing together the industry and we're solving together pressing sustainability challenges. Because when it comes to sustainability, we cannot think about competitors. We need to work in collaboration.
Collaboration over competition, right?
Carolina, you and Tom brought up the issue of scale and the role of the private sector. It strikes me again as an outsider that what you've done with the 100 Plus Accelerator is really build on the scale that AB InBev has, but also drive towards the attribute of speed. And that's not easy to do for such a large organization. So for me, I see you really having the ability to have the scale, obviously over 400 beer brands, I believe, plus the speed through the accelerator, and now mobilizing other multinationals to amplify that initial strategy that you launched with 100 Plus. So it really sort of an interesting role that the company's playing with respect to scale and speed and the ability to move back and forth.
Of course, and maybe it would be worth to tell the audience and the people who are listening us what is the 100 Plus Accelerator and what we do, because we've been talking so much about it, and maybe there's someone saying like, but what is this platform you're talking about? So maybe just as a summary, the 100 Plus Accelerator, it's an initiative that was launched back in 2018 by Anheuser-Busch InBev to actually solve these pressing sustainability challenges that we had. So we have over 150,000 employees all over the world, but even though they are brilliant and they're truly committed, we don't have the answers to everything. So we needed to open up our doors, go outside and look for innovators, startups, all across the world that were already solving these sustainability challenges and that actually had a product or an initiative in market with traction. And startups are very agile and fast, as you were mentioning. So we decided to partner with them. We posted our challenges on our webpage and selected 20 startups in the first year, gave them each up to $100,000 equity free so they could implement a pilot in our value chain with a big add-on, because we actually gave them, even if you were a startup working in Accra, Ghana, or Bogota, Colombia, or Washington, USA, you had a team that was helping you be successful, that was helping you navigate in this very complex multinational and helping you implement your pilot. The pilot was agreed with the teams. We had KPIs, we had a time frame of 6 months or so. And then at the end of the pilot, we showed the results, and the idea was to help these companies grow and scale with us, because due to our size, we have the capacity to help these companies grow at a pace that they had never imagined. That's why it makes it so special, these partnerships, because they have the solution and the innovations, and we can actually help them grow and deploy these solutions all over the world. So we began with the 100 Plus Accelerator for 2 years with very successful results. We worked with 36 companies in over 15 countries at the time, and then something marvelous happened. And it's when we launched this program back in 2018, we never wanted to be the only company behind the 100 Plus Accelerator, because as we have been talking through, we need collaboration to make this truly powerful and for this to be a truly game changer. And at that moment, Unilever, Coca-Cola, and Colgate Palmolive knocked on our door and decided that they didn't want to invent the wheel, that we already had something good out there that of course could be better if they joined, and now it's even better thanks to them. But that we had something very valuable out there, and that it was a good opportunity to work on it together. And that's why since 2021, we launched the global program, the 100 Plus Accelerator, as an initiative from where the 4 companies are working together to boost innovation. And we're working with startups all across the world. We just finished our first cohort, and we're about to select the second cohort of this partnership.
I think what I find interesting is because we speak to a lot of startups where they have the solution to a challenge, but trying to kind of get the foot into the door of a multinational is arguably one of the biggest challenges. And you can sense the frustration, but actually what this has done, if you go back to the 100 plus, is handpicking a range of startups to actually work in partnership with you to solve a challenge that doesn't just apply to AB InBev, but other companies as well. So as a result, you can help to develop, nurture, shepherd along a solution that can benefit the supply chain in beer production and drinks outside of the AB InBev remit.
Of course. And to be honest, you would be surprised when you think, okay, a company that produces beer, what do you have in common with a company that produces ice cream and produces deodorant and shampoos like Unilever? And we have so much in common because both these companies, and I'm just putting these two as an example, we all want to transition to zero net emissions. We all want to protect our watersheds. We want to transition to regenerative agriculture in all the crops that we work with. So actually something that's funny, and I'll tell this as an anecdote, we already had, when we launched the program, we had a very comprehensive list of challenges that were curated by our subject matter experts, very technical and precise challenges, from like eliminating the plastic liner on our caps, amongst others. And we sent the list to Unilever, Colgate, and Coca-Cola. Like, here's our challenge list, please add yours. We want to include all of your challenges. I'm not exaggerating when I think that they added like 5 sub-challenges, maybe 10, out of a list of 100, let's say, because we were already sharing the same challenges. And that's why it makes so much sense to work together, because I think we could summarize these in 4 key benefits. One, that we are jointly doing innovation, so we can like reduce cost efficiencies. Become more cost efficient, because we don't have to, each of us, test and see what happens. Like, one of us can test and tell the other and share the information. We can also have more use cases. So sometimes a technology that a startup provides can work for different use cases. And if we work together, we can test many different ones. And also we can leapfrog. We are like, when a startup learns from working with a company, the other company can leapfrog from working with that startup. So it makes a lot of sense.
Carolina, it also strikes me that this construct with ABI and other multinationals also has the ability to change how these individual companies look at innovation and the innovation process. So yes, you're looking for entrepreneurs that have a particular solution, but the sort of knockoff value is that Unilever is going to think about innovation and how to scale innovation differently than AB InBev would. So there's this really learning opportunity among multinationals that is also transformative in itself. Is that fair to say?
Yeah, that's completely fair to say. We are learning all the time from each other. However, I think that what has been successful is that we've all stuck to the same model. So each startup that is selected has a team within each of the companies that is working with them. And sometimes that team is the R&D team, which is great because sometimes a startup has a product that is in market but can be improved. And thanks to the work with the R&D teams, they actually get this product to another level. So it's a joint effort, a joint collaboration. But since we establish KPIs and we have a time frame, the companies that sometimes would move slower, would be more conservative, they have the urge to actually deliver. And I think that we need to be okay with failing, right? Like, not all the pilots will be successful. We will not like discover the answers on every single pilot. Some companies are not ready yet. Some are very early stage. Some are wildcards. Some are, the technology is there, but it's not cost efficient at the end of the day. And we know this. And I think that that was something very important to get this consensus with the companies. And it's that innovation, it's very important because it's what will make us get through the breakthroughs, but it's not going to work 100% of the time. And we need to understand this and be okay with this. So I think because we already share the same values and the same principles, that's why we've managed to deliver the program on a very agile way. Because if you know something about ABI, besides our great beers that I hope that you like and love, we are also very fast. We are like widely known for being very fast and agile, and we don't want to lose this, because this is one of the key characteristics of the project, that you can have a pilot for over 7 months and then actually have a go-to-market and scale. Sometimes we actually need to like help our teams be less ambitious, because then they want to bring a startup to 20 countries in 1 year, which is impossible. But, you know, so we don't want to lose that characteristic of being agile.
So this goes back to the earlier conversation that you have the ability to leverage your scale, but also have the agility and focus and speed of a startup. And that's really interesting. So the opportunity for a multinational at that scale to understand risk, failure, and have that agility baked into your DNA is incredibly powerful, and hopefully infectious with other companies that you're working with. Infectious in a good way.
Definitely. And actually, well, we are now a partnership of 4 of the largest consumer goods companies in the world. And we love working with Coca-Cola, Colgate, Palmolive, and Unilever. But we want to go beyond that. We want to work with even more companies and with even more players, because this is the way that we're actually going to make the 100+ Accelerator truly transformative.
Carolina, what would that look like? I mean, would you, you know, you're obviously 4 multinationals that are in the consumer-facing sectors. Is your thinking that you would move, you would snag somebody in another industry sector that would be unusual in a way? So, you know, maybe utility or maybe, you know, an energy company. Would that make sense going forward in terms of your ability to have an impact?
Of course. And we want to grow smart. So of course, we want to grow with similar companies joining the partnership. And we are already having many conversations with some of them that will hopefully join soon. But we also want to have partners that can help us upstream and downstream. So for example, our suppliers, this is key. Many of our pilots can only be achieved if we actually bring our suppliers in. So from packaging suppliers, like, and it makes a lot of sense. Like if you think of AB InBev and Coca-Cola, we're like together, we're the largest can, we purchase the largest amount of cans in the world. So it would make a lot of sense to bring our packaging suppliers in, but also technology companies, you know, like, and retailers. What about like these big retailers where we all sell our products?
Brilliant.
I remember when we had Andre Furry on the stream. I think it was season 2, right, Will? We're now towards the end of season 4, so we've done quite a lot of episodes. But it was another fantastic guest, and I remember him saying actually the 100+ was designed without, to use an English pub analogy, and being British, we do love those analogies, without the kind of name above the door. So it's kind of free to be used with other companies. And when we look from that interview to where we are today and the new companies you're working with, that's exactly the strategy that's played out. So that's good to see. So talk to us then, because you mentioned some of the beer companies that are part of your portfolio, and you're doing some interesting pilots when it comes to the topic of plastics recycling, collection. There's a lot of talk and press and media attention around plastics in the environment. So can you talk to us about that work you're doing with Corona?
Yes, of course. So packaging is definitely one of the subjects that actually unites the 4 companies, because it's a key priority for all of us to transition to completely sustainable packaging, from refillable bottles to 100% made of recycled content, amongst others. So out of the 35 companies of this last cohort, actually 13 are focused on circular packaging. And we have different initiatives, from increasing our post-consumer waste collection to testing new materials to replace a single-use plastic, for example. So there are many examples, but the one that you mentioned is great, because we always want to engage with our brands. Brands are very powerful. They can also speak to consumers. And one of our like main achievements is to be working closely with the brands. So Corona, one of our most beloved brands, you know, Corona wants to protect its paradise, which is the oceans. And you know, the oceans are threatened by plastic pollution, and everyone knows the like this figure that by 2050, there will be more plastics in the ocean than fish in the ocean. That actually something that's interesting is that for many of our startups that are working on solving the single-use plastic problem, this was something that inspired them and motivated them. So Corona is focused on these, and now Corona has the pledge to eliminate plastic throughout its value chain. And they know that through the 100 Plus Accelerator, they can actually achieve this ambition. And that's why they are sponsoring specific challenges within the 100 Plus Accelerator. And if you go to our webpage, you'll see that we have our categories like climate action, but we also have the Corona Plastic Free Challenge, and most recently, the Rexona Inclusivity Challenge, that it's also a brand from Unilever's portfolio that has its own specific challenges. So talking about Corona, you would think, well, Corona, glass bottles, where's all the plastic? Why are you making such a fuss? Well, Corona does have plastic. And if you think of all the value chain, we especially have plastic on secondary and tertiary packaging. So one of the main pain points for Corona is how to replace the stretch film that it is, pallet wrap that we use to transport the Corona beers. And it's hard to replace those flexible packaging. So this year, for example, we are working with an Israeli startup called Solutum that produces a biodegradable and soluble plastic that is as functional as the stretch film, and that potentially we can change the stretch film that we are currently using with Solutum's technology. Until now, we're very happy because all the lab tests are very successful. And if everything goes according to plan, we would do a market deployment. We have selected Canada as the potential market for implementation. But talking about Solutum, and I'll finish with this, when I mentioned before that you can work with a startup and in different use cases, Solutum is also working with Colgate, and they are actually producing a completely biodegradable and soluble bag that the dentist can use to give you the toothpaste and the toothbrush when you go to the dentist. So they are replacing the poly bag with solutions alternatives. So two completely use cases, same startup.
That's fascinating. I look forward to getting one of those bags because they're, right now it's such a waste. That's
well,
great.
Spoiler alert, if you come to Demo Day, you'll get one.
I was confident you were going to bring it up. Okay.
Well, that's a nice natural segue. So the demo day is designed to, I guess it's the physical gathering of the four brands together, right? This is in New York. Talk to us a bit about it's going to be kind of late in the evening UK time, but I'm hoping to tune in virtually. So tell me the purpose, because obviously the last couple of years without the physical get-togethers, a lot of stuff's been done virtually, but this is almost a sort of celebratory gathering of the 100 plus and the brands involved. And also, I think when you get hundreds of entrepreneurs and startups together, it's going to be a kind of not a party atmosphere, but a very positive vibe, right?
Of course, and well, we are a beer company, so we always have a good party and a good party vibe as part of our culture as well. But we're looking forward to have and host a really, really interesting and inspiring event in New York on June 9, and everyone is also welcome to join us through streaming. We're going to bring the 35 companies working with us in over 20 countries. We're going to fly them to New York, and they're going to share the results of the pilot in front of key industry leaders, VCs, several stakeholders. So we think that this event will definitely be very inspiring. And, last year we did it virtually, and, it was one of the challenges of COVID, and it was okay, and it was great. But I think that the power that comes of being in person and having these true human connections is going to be amazing. So we're very excited, and we actually dream to make this a sustainability and innovation event to watch out for every year. Now in New York, maybe in other countries in the future, but we're definitely looking forward to a long-term vision.
And I think there's something powerful about bringing together like-minded entrepreneurs to also share notes, exchange on their current challenges and scaling up and hiring, and also working with AB. And we saw that from a recent event in Madrid. where naturally the kind of the founders were getting together, oh, you know, how are you getting on scaling and this latest round of investment and actually changing notes. So having those founders all together there's something very powerful around that, right? Okay.
Of course.
So then very finally, something I know we wanted to touch on is the kind of, we've talked about the role of the private sector and the scale of multinationals to kind of address these challenges. And I know something that's very close to your heart, Carolina, is kind of addressing biodiversity loss in the environment, right? And recently we had the International Biodiversity Day. So in terms of where you see the role of AB InBev, the other companies, and the 100+, can you talk to us a bit about that, please?
Yes, of course. And as I mentioned at the beginning, for me, protecting nature was my key driver to begin my journey in the sustainability space. And I do believe, and I think it's evident when you see at all the reports, that biodiversity loss, it's one of the key challenges that we're facing in this century. And it's happening at a pace that we can't even imagine. And different to the climate movement, where I think corporations and several stakeholders understood pretty fast what needed to be done with biodiversity loss, it's even harder, right? It's something that we are starting to understand and to act upon. And this year, we're very happy because we launched the Biodiversity Challenge as well in the 100+ Accelerator. We didn't have it before. And in our 4th cohort, we're including biodiversity as one of our key pillars. Of course, for all of us, all these 4 companies, we're dependent on a thriving environment, right? So we're dependent on biodiversity to be successful, but we need to see how we can support the startups that are helping us to do this. And we have, like right now, interesting applications that are connected to biodiversity and you wouldn't even think of. So for example, palm oil replacement. As you know, palm oil, it's used for everything. And in our case of Unilever and Colgate, they use it in many products, from ice cream, mayonnaise to the toothpaste, right? And unfortunately, palm oil has been also one of the drivers of deforestation worldwide. So what if we, of course, traceability for palm oil is critical, but what if we can also find replacements that are as effective to palm oil? So this is something that we're looking for and has a direct impact to biodiversity, or also our watersheds. We are always like, and Will knows this very well, but when we are addressing our watershed work, we have been always focused on increasing water regulation, increasing water infiltration and recharge in our aquifers. But when we're doing this, we're also having many positive effects on biodiversity. When you implement nature-based solutions, you're having positive effects. So how can we measure that? How can we enhance this? And what's the relationship between water and other ecosystemic services? This is important for us. And then if you also look at another thing like soil biodiversity, what does this mean? Like having rich soils that can actually help you have resilient crops in the future and migrate to regenerative agriculture also has an impact in helping soil biodiversity. So definitely a topic that it's very interesting, and I can't wait to see all the applications that are coming through and to keep on working on this agenda, because biodiversity loss is one of the most wicked, to call upon this word that Will was using since the beginning, problems that we're facing. And it's also devastating because once we lose a species, we lose them forever, right? So we are basically losing the planet's history and memory, and we need to act upon it. And something that it's, for me, very inspiring is that, of course, humans and us, we have been part of the problem, but we are also the only species that can focus on regenerating Earth and regenerating biodiversity as well. So I think that this is very powerful, and it's something that we need to focus all of our efforts.
I think that's a really nice note to kind of end on. I think we always talk about cutting things and reducing things, but actually positively impacting the environment and positively impacting biodiversity. There's something to be said for that. And arguably a lot of the other areas you mentioned, cutting single-use plastics, if you're stopping those plastics getting into the environment and impacting aquatic life and potential impacts on biodiversity, there's a knock-on impact from the other areas as well, right? So Great stuff. Well, Carolina, that kind of gets us to that magic 30 minutes. So we really enjoyed chatting to you and hearing more. Good luck for the demo day coming up in New York and the continued cascading of the 100+ Accelerator. Will, any final comments and remarks on your side?
But of course, I love how the conversation went to essentially identifying what an agile multinational looks like. Because, I talk a lot about wicked problems and who solves wicked problems, and tend to put stakeholders in a certain part of that graph. Well, the ability to be an agile multinational and the impact that you can have, not just alone, but with others, a really interesting construct. So I'm glad you brought that up.
Well, thank you both for inviting me. It has been a great conversation with both of you. And I hope that we meet again at the stream, maybe when we have more companies in our platform and that we are changing the world together. And of course, hopefully we'll also have some of our startups having this great conversation with both of you. It has been wonderful. So thank you again for the invitation.
Our pleasure.
Well, Carolina, thank you for joining, and hopefully you won't get inundated with requests for recommendations from Madrid now. Great stuff. Well, yeah, good luck with everything, and yeah, we'll catch up with you soon. Thanks for your time.
Excellent. Thank you.
Thank you, Carolina.